Welcome, everyone, to Series 2 of RP Book Club, The Case for a Job Guarantee by Pavlina Tcherneva. My name is Ramona Masacci. I'm an artist, not an economist, but since I discovered MMT, I want to share it with everyone. I've been working with Real Progressives to put together this book club. If you missed Series 1 on the deficit myth by Stephanie Kelton, you can find the videos at realprogressive.org. Look for the RP Book Club in the media menu. Tonight's Q&A covers Chapter 3, the job guarantee, a new social contract, and macroeconomics, and Chapter 4, but how will you pay for it? I am honored to introduce Dr. Pavlina Tcherneva. She is an associated professor of economics at Bard College and a research scholar at the Levy Economics Institute. She specializes in modern monetary theory and public policy. Welcome, Pavlina. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ramona. Thank you, Real Progressives. It's good to be with you again. And thanks for organizing this book club.
Raul has a question you may ask.
Good evening, Ramona, and good evening, Dr. Tcherneva. It's a great book. I bought it last year, and I'm looking forward to the sequel, if you have one ready. My question is, would the implementation of a federal job guarantee render minimum wage legislation redundant? If not, why is a national minimum wage still required? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Raul. Appreciate the question. As you know, we have argued that the job guarantee will help establish a labor standard. And I'm happy to talk more broadly about what that might involve. But the minimum wage is one key component of that standard. And the basic premise here is that no person who's working should earn below what constitutes some minimum dignified level of income. Now, we know that the minimum wage fails many people today, right? We have a minimum wage, but it's not enough. It's a poverty wage. And so if you imagine a situation where tomorrow the government puts in place a public option for jobs, a job guarantee, then that becomes a default. It becomes a standard for wages. Would that invalidate the minimum wage legislation? You know, I think that they best work together, that the job is easier done with a minimum wage and with an employment option. In other words, the minimum wage will provide the kind of competition that we've suggested, right? If you've got folks working at $7.25 an hour, and then there's an option in their community locally to work at 15, then that will pressure the employer to raise the wage. We find this to be a desirable feature. But as you know, the political economy of these policies, can be complicated. So an effective way of moving forward is, in fact, to do it in tandem, to raise the minimum wage and put in place an employment option at that wage, which then really doesn't have to have this kind of, if you will, antagonistic relationship between private jobs and the public sector job. The private sector jobs simply have to raise the wage. And we see this happening often, right? Minimum wage ordinances, local legislation, state legislation, raising the wage. Firms have no trouble doing this. They do it all the time. They do it overnight when necessary. So I think that support for the program and a firming up of the labor standard will be more effective doing both.
Thank you, Pavlina. Rob has a question.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Tcherneva. I have a question. Would a federal job guarantee include those who can only work part-time or have to take an extended leave of absence from their job due to medical reasons? If so, would they be eligible to collect Social Security payments in the times that they're unable to work? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Rob, for this question. So the way I think about the program is in the following ways. it's really not a narrow proposal just for eliminating unemployment. It's a policy that is situated within a broader safety net, a broader vision of what the public sector must do, needs to do, how to rethink the role of the public sector, the role of the kind of supports and that we provide. And they take multiple forms. A job is just one piece. So the chapter that you listen to, chapter 3, is about a new social contract. And that chapter basically suggests that we have to think about the many different ways in which people experience economic insecurity. And it's not only the absence of jobs. So you can have retirement insecurity. So Social Security is absolutely part of the welfare safety net. Unemployment insurance is part of the safety net, right? This is not a program that replaces the current supports that exist out there. It's an additional program. So, my argument in the book is that we really don't have a crucial piece. We have a way of thinking about other dimensions of economic insecurity, right? We don't do a terribly good job on all aspects, but we say, okay, young people need education. And so the public sector provides education. The elderly or people who have reached, the end of their working lives, they need income security in retirement. We provide that. We are slogging through this conversation about what it means to have health security, right? Healthcare security. We still haven't arrived to the answer. Even in the middle of pandemic, we are not providing guaranteed healthcare. But when it comes to COVID, it kind of is nationalized care, right? So we are in this very slow conversation of rethinking of what the safety net should be. But somehow jobs are always the afterthought, the last solution, and we don't have the direct solution for employment. I'm digressing a little bit from your original question, but if you look at how today we talk about jobs, we do everything in the name of jobs. An infrastructure plan, a family plan, a CARES Act, everything is done in the name of jobs. Even some of the language around the Green New Deal uses the notion of jobs as being sort of, a primary objective. But unless we're explicit that those are provided directly, it will be wishful thinking that jobs will be provided for all. So some people may need to have part-time employment. That was part of your question. And what we are trying to do with the job guarantee is provide an option, a public option that helps those who need to work. And I'll give you an example. In my own community, we were doing an assessment of what are the social deprivations with some of my students this semester. And in my community, we have single parents. For them, that is going to be a major obstacle. Childcare is going to be a major obstacle to employment. So a job guarantee with a part-time option, mother-friendly, father-friendly, parent-friendly option, right? Flexible hours would be a component of the job guarantee. So the short answer is full-time, part-time option, and no, the job guarantee doesn't replace the safety net.
Curtis has a question. If local communities and organizations are the stewards of the job guarantee, how do we ensure equality amongst our communities, fully understanding our communities are far from equal with each other now?
Well, I'm not sure I understand fully what equality among community is. So when we talk about designing the job guarantee, we talk about specific local needs, locally created jobs, specific, not just social needs, but the people who might avail themselves and take those employment opportunities. So our communities are not equal in the sense that we don't experience economic problems in the same way. There is a diversity of economic deprivations. So I'll give you this example. I'll carry it with the example that that I used a moment ago. My students compared two communities in New York and tried to create green jobs proposals for them, this past semester. And one community is one that had very high asthma rates. Children with, health problems, asthma rates that dwarf the national averages. Another community had people with mental health problems. So when we think about job creation, we need to know what we're dealing with. We need to know what kinds of social needs we're trying to address. We also looked at demographics, right? The demographics. So in one community, there were a lot of young people of color that experienced unemployment. In another community, it was mostly, white women, again, single or, single parents. There were different demographics. Why do we need to know that? What we need to know that is not to stigmatize folks and say, oh, well, there are just a lot of delinquent youth and that's why this community doesn't, have enough jobs. But we need to figure out what are their obstacles to employment. So for young people, it could be GED, high school education. So when we think about job creation, we need to know who they are. What are their other aspects of life that they need to deal with so that they can take advantage of these employment opportunities. If another community, as I said, childcare is a major obstacle, then that's what we need to be thinking about. So I think equality of opportunity for me is provided by a guaranteed option that is available to anyone and everyone, wherever they may be. When we talk about obstacles to employment, the largest obstacle to employment is the absence of a job. Right? That's the largest obstacle to employment. And so just providing that guarantee that when you go to the unemployment office and you look for employment, you can walk out with an option that is local, that is accessible, that you can take advantage of.
Dateland has a question. If we get federal job guarantee legislation passed, will those employed by federal job guarantee have 401ks or some type of retirement plan?
The proposal doesn't include 401k. The proposal includes Social Security, and it includes for the job guarantee to provide healthcare, Social Security, and childcare. I think, you have a point to say that Social Security is not adequate, right? That, for a lot of people, that's not enough. And many employers provide additional insurance. The federal government does the same. People who work for the federal government, there are like a couple of retirement plans that they have access to beyond Social Security. So that could be an option. That could be one way in which we can really strengthen our retirement system through the employment program. I mean, we have Social Security, but even that program doesn't work terribly well. I mean, it works as well as you can expect. It's actually extraordinarily successful. But there are 4% of working people who do not earn enough or have work experience long enough to actually qualify for Social Security. So it's 4%, but we need to do better, right? We need to get, so I think that there are multiple ways in which we can strengthen the income security component of the safety net.
Tommy has a question. You can unmute, Tommy.
Hi. I was just wondering, what do you think about the job guarantee, including and funding citizen science programs like Skywarn, Storm Spotners, or COCORAS, which is a community collaborative rain, hail, and snow network? We're volunteers right now that measure precipitation, and it goes to help, the National Weather Service and groups like that, with the weather forecast. I was just wondering, maybe the job guarantee might be able to partner with nonprofits like that to pay people to create good science observations or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. That is part and parcel of the proposal. So the basic vision of the job guarantee is that we have kind of underserved certain areas of social public life, right? And there are countless activities that are important, valuable to the community that are not there, or as you just said, are done on volunteer basis. We have programs where we get children to plant some trees, right? And it's a sort of, volunteer project, and planting trees really shouldn't be a volunteer project, right? That is critically essential. I think just recognizing the kind of climate problems that we're faced with, there is just so much work that we need to do. So, trees are, the lungs of the city, if you will. They are absolutely important, critical urban infrastructure, rural infrastructure, and on it goes. And so in that sense, yes, these are perfect examples because they tend to be things that don't have profit return, right? The weather is not a customer for us, right? The weather doesn't pay, a price of your weather service, and we can't monetize it, but we have to do it because it's part of our livelihoods, and you do it with your communities and on volunteer basis. And so one of the proposals that I had written up before the book came out, and I also discuss a little bit in the book, is that the job guarantee is public service employment, but how is it delivered? And one of the most effective ways in which it can be delivered to the community is, in fact, connect to stakeholders and people who are already there and doing important work. And they have the know-how, they have a good awareness and understanding of the specific problems. And we simply mobilize them to do more and do better. And, you hear these stories, I'm sure you can share similar stories of how, when you do it on volunteer basis, you just, some people are really overworked in the sense that they can't quite meet the mission of the project. An example would be, enrichment programs and after school activities in a urban community, in a poor neighborhood that desperately needs them, but doesn't have enough. And because we are counting on programs being done on volunteer basis. And my proposition is we need permanent infrastructure. We need permanent infrastructure. We need partners from all walks of life: the nonprofit, the cities, municipalities, all aspects of civil society that can participate in the delivery of the projects and the creating of job opportunities. I think there is something to be said about having a public sector infrastructure that is local, on the ground, that are public, if you will, institutions that are art centers, right? Environmental, groups that are, permanent and can provide employment, following, basic sort of procurement standards, federal standards. But my feeling is that if we really want this to happen on a large scale in every corner, in every community, you've got to use all the help that you can get. And the nonprofits are extremely important because they're there. They're trying to fill that gap that the public sector has left open, and the private sector has no mission to fill.
No, it's not profitable. Mark has a question.
Hi, Pavlina. How are you?
Hi. I'm doing well.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a concern that I run into all the time. And in fact, we had some people talk about this last week, but there's a concern about people in the job guarantee not being able to be fired. And in fact, I get it so much that my standard answer is to make it number 26 and link to your FAQ page. You had such an elegant answer to that, tying in with the jobs that are fit to the person. And I don't want to take the wind out of your sails, so go ahead and Tell people about your thoughts on firing and the job guarantee program.
Yeah, this is, the problem is with the word guarantee. So I'm gonna make a little digression in a moment about why that should not scare us. But the basic point is the job guarantee job is a job like any other. Like somehow people think that this is some other program that's the current predominant framework of thinking about dealing with unemployment is a charity model, right? That this is a handout. And so because that's the conventional paradigm, when people see a job program for the unemployed that is provided as a guarantee, on standby, they're also thinking, well, it's just no strings attached. But the job is a job, right? It's just, you just look at any basic organization, its functionality. Like we don't provide income for no work or for being, ineffective, not showing up for work. So of course, if you don't show up, you don't get paid, right? If you don't do the work and you don't perform, you don't get paid. And this is again like this false understanding that somehow people will go into the job guarantee, they'll kick their feet, and they're just going to be collecting a paycheck. They'll do some minimum necessary, requirement for the job. I think this is just ideology. It's just not how it works. I mean, we have done this before. We have created countless public service employment projects. And if you just follow the examples that I just gave, like, are we really saying that people who are checking the weather and rainfall are, if you make this a formal job, they're just not going to do it? Of course not. They will be doing it because that's a useful, valuable, it has, work is so much more than just the paycheck. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people who can't quite envision what a job guarantee would look like are imagining. Somebody going in and not, caring about the work that they are going to be doing. And we don't see that evidence of that anywhere, right? We have lots of jobs programs for young people, for people with real trouble, former inmates, like people want jobs. They really want to do well and to do good work. So I think that has always been a very strong ideological argument. But the point is, if somebody doesn't show up or they're disruptive, they get fired. Now, in that number 26 question answer that I provide, I think I also was raising the question, well, why is a person not successful on the job? Right? Maybe we should be thinking about that. If somebody is having trouble keeping up basic hours, working hours, what is it? You know what happens in the private workplace. If you don't perform according to specific criteria, you're out. If you're on Amazon and you take a 16-minute break, not 15-minute break, you're out, right? You can't go to a bathroom. That's not what a job guarantee is, right? That doesn't punish people because they don't perform like, a cog in a little conveyor belt or in a little, machine. The job guarantee is public service. We serve the public, and that includes the people who are working. And so if a person is having trouble being successful in the job, we want to know why. So it could be young people who are having trouble, at school, they may be transportation issues. They may be childcare. Yes, they may be substance abuse issues, right? These are legitimate things. We want to understand what that is. And the care economy, that vision of providing employment and providing service says, well, we connect people with the kinds of support they need to be successful in what they want to do. They've clearly shown up at the door, and they're asking for an opportunity. And so I just really like to think in these broader terms. And my experience tells me that those questions tend to come, I think, from folks who are not quite able to see the difference between the public option from conventional work. right? That we need to make this intellectual leap to be able to truly envision a different workplace, a different way of doing things, right? So that's one. But let me just take a little digression about the guarantee part. I run against this very often. What is, the job? Well, how could you be guaranteeing a job? There are no guarantees, right? That's, the government should not be guaranteeing anything. And the government guarantees everything. Like, that's one thing most people don't understand. The government guarantees so many things of our economic life. Like, just think of basic contracts. Right? You think, Amazon or, DARPA or these mega NASA projects are going to be undertaken if the government didn't guarantee that the funding will be there? If the government said, well, we'll give you a little bit of money, but maybe some of it is not going to come forth, right? Or the project can go bust and then we won't pay the rest of the bills. That doesn't happen. Yeah, we know that projects go bust all the time. Right, we know that. But procurement is a guarantee. Every government contract is a guarantee. Okay. Actually, you can think of public guarantees in 3 different ways. One is in this sense, that you have guaranteed finance. And that obviously connects to the next chapter, right? The understanding of the public purse, the sovereign currency system. We guarantee finance, we guarantee contracts, but we also guarantee certain services. Not terribly well, but there are public parks, right? If you want recreation and you're able to access it, it's guaranteed. We have not closed the doors and said, you got to pay a ticket and this has to be done for profit. And, we have to maintain the park so that there is a ticket. But what I'm saying is that there are many natural trails and parks, and there are, public spaces we enjoy because in a sense they are guaranteed, right? They're not provided in sufficient number, but that is part of the public function, isn't it? And so we don't quite think about that very much. Libraries, do you want to go and get a book? That's kind of guaranteed, right? You can always find a library, and libraries now are not just a place for books. They are also an incredibly important resource for, people who are looking for work, for the homeless. We understand they are a crucial institution. That's guaranteed. Education is guaranteed, right? So these are what we call public options, okay? Then you also have other guarantees, and those are price guarantees. Right. So I talk a little bit about that, I think, in this chapter, but those are guarantees for, the price of gold, right? So it's really the price of the currency in terms of gold, but when you flip it around, it's actually the price of gold, right? A gold standard regime is a price guarantee for a piece of shiny metal, right? It has a price that the government guarantees. And so the buying and selling of gold and currency is securing that price. We guaranteed the price of commodities. I mean, you guys are so well versed in all of this. You've listened to these so many times, but you know the example of commodity buffer stocks, the buying and selling of the commodity so that we can set the price. Now, if you look a little bit how prices are set today for agricultural commodities, we still have some buffer stock features, and we have and other models, but it's a subsidy. Government, again, guarantees. So guarantees are everywhere. But somehow, when we talk about labor, that becomes kind of a radical idea. And I think the question that I raised in that book is, which is the most important price? Like, can you tell me which we think is the most important price in the economy we need to guarantee? Like, we guarantee the price of money. That's interest rates. We guarantee, exactly what the interest rate is going to be, right? The benchmark interest rate is set. It's a price. It's set by government. It's guaranteed. There's no mystery. When the government raises the price of money, we know what it is. But it's guaranteed. And somehow we don't guarantee the price of labor. We think we do that by the minimum wage, but as we well know, that is not a price guarantee. If you don't find the job, you can't enjoy the price guarantee. So you have to have both a price guarantee and an employment policy. You got to have somebody buying and selling bonds so you can fix the price. You can guarantee the price of the bond, right? You need to have somebody on standby buying and selling the commodity so you can guarantee that price. So we do it all the time, gold, right? Other commodities, but not for labor. Is there a better price than the wage work? Is there a more important, socially important price that we need to guarantee? And I want to acknowledge, it's not like not all labor is paid labor, right? We also have a lot of unpaid labor. So we have to think very seriously about how we guarantee the support for labor and the minimum support for labor, whether it's paid or not paid. But in the market for paid work, that's a commodity, right? You know, labor it's a fictitious commodity. It's a fake commodity, as Carl Polanyi talks about it. But when we have a system which buys and sells labor, we don't have a guarantee. I think that is really, apart from the economic arguments why that's not necessary, I think it's a bankrupt model. Have not economists done better? You know, we should be able to have better models and ideas in economics that don't rely on natural rate of unemployment or low wages for market efficiency. I mean, that just is on so many levels, right? Bankrupt. I'm just going to stop here.
So true. Nicholas has a question. You can unmute.
Hello, Pavlina. It's an honor to ask this question to you. A lot of your work has actually inspired a lot of my passion for the job guarantee. So I'd like to thank you for that beforehand. But before I think I already have a probably somewhat of an answer to this, but this is something I want to see your perspective from. One thing that I often get asked is, how do you find meaningful jobs to do in the job guarantee program? I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I mean, meaning is such a subjective thing, right? Nick, thank you so much for this question and for asking it. It's very much a subjective thing, right? We can't legislate meaning, right? I don't think that I can possibly propose a policy that will say, well, this is going to be guaranteed meaningful job. But what we know is that it works the other way. That if you guarantee a job, that in and of itself provides meaning, because we just survey people, like we know how they respond, how strongly they relate their overall well-being, their purpose of life with what they do. And, this is not a false ideology of advocating for, paid work, slave wage society. It's not that. That is part of the human condition. We work. That's what we do. Whether we're in capitalist society, pre-capitalist, whatever society, we work. We support each other. We produce so that we do well, our children do well, our communities do well. That's work. And so what has become problematic is that in the modern world, work has been commodified in this very artificial way, but this is where we're at. Work has been commodified and has been commodified under very difficult conditions in some sense. So the people who work in the low wage jobs tend to have the least amount of self-determination in the workplace. Right? For them, the employment opportunity is very important, right? But it's not the kind of empowerment or that they feel through the job. And yet what happens? They organize, right? McDonald's workers organize. They organize against sexual harassment. They believe that the workplace is a good place to be and it should be better. Right? Yeah, there are people, middle-class folks who work some jobs that they don't feel meaning and purpose, and they're just doing it because they know they need to bring home the paycheck and they don't believe in what they're doing. And that's again about how we self-determine. What is our capacity to influence our workplace? How do we democratize the workplace. So that's a different conversation, right? Because it's also about work in the private sector. In the public sector, you see the principles are somewhat different because we are not chasing you for specific narrow definition of productivity, right? We're not saying, well, why did you plant, only 6 trees when you should have planted 7, right? That's not the criteria. What we do is we, hopefully, right, that's the aspiration, that because it's public service, we think about it in this engineering sense. Like, what is the problem to solve? Well, our community has, lead pipes. So, when can we check all of them, right? Like, how long would it take? How many people would it take? And then we check the box. Did we fulfill the mission? Would that be meaningful work? I think yes, right? To be part of a project where you go and make sure that there are, folks who are not drinking from lead pipes. I think that's meaningful. Are you afraid for your job because you checked only 5 pipes and not 6? I mean, of course, you can always have a poorly run program. You can always have somebody with a board and, coming and monitor. Of course, that can happen. But I think our general experience is such that people are engaged in socially useful projects. I think that the meaning of work has been robbed by the model of, private profit-driven employment. I think that has been the issue, right? The bullshit job argument of David Graeber. I think that is predominantly an argument about private sector work that invents work for the sake of, not for the sake of a public purpose, but for the sake of. So again, as I said, we want to recognize, any program can be run very poorly, but the philosophy behind the project is different. So, I think that it's a long answer, but I hope that helped.
I have a question.
I'm going to ask one too, Ramona. You go first.
Okay. So if we have a public sector of jobs, right? God willing, we have a public sector of jobs, and people are finding meaning in those jobs. They're able to help their communities. They're able to advance their communities. And so people start leaving the private sector to go to the public sector. What kind of shift does that create, and how do we manage that?
Yeah, it's a multi-layered question. So, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that, right? If people want to do more community work, that is a people-driven paradigm shift, right? I don't want to, produce sneakers. I want to plant trees. Does that presuppose somewhat different market mechanism? Potentially. I mean, I don't foresee in the near future, some mass exodus from private sector employment into the public sector, right? I don't foresee it. But could the public option do that? For some, yes, I think that can happen. I think that this is very much a question about the structure of the economy, and how that is evolving. I don't have a good answer except to say that the private sector itself is evolving, right? It itself is engaged in production that is changing, right? We have, technological production. We have, technology affords us new ways of living our lives, right? New ways of living, new ways of enjoying it, potentially, right? It creates new needs, right? New things we want. And so there is a certain kind of logic, internal logic to that dynamism and private sector job creation. And maybe some of it is not great, not the one we want to encourage, right? If a lot of it is based on waste, then we definitely don't want that logic to carry forward. So there needs to be other work, and there need to be other policies to address that. The waste, the mass production, the absence of sufficient recycling, right? That waste of and environmental destruction, that presupposes different structure of the private sector activity. So I don't think that's the job of the job guarantee. I think that the job guarantee can very much facilitate the green transition, which is why it was a piece, very important piece in the green strategy. And that's the last chapter. You can read that later. So, and I talk about how it's, there are three different meanings of the job guarantee in the climate package. But the job guarantee is almost, if you will, small relative to the scale of the problems that we are facing, but has so much potential, the seeds of so much transformation that can occur in the economy and the labor market.
Pavlina, I've heard of several things that surprised me. You always talk about all the ways that we can care for each other and the planet, that the limit is basically our imagination. And recently, a few months ago, Fadl Kaboub said something about, our main job during the pandemic was to stay healthy. The idea being that even that can be a job guarantee job, staying home and taking care of your family. The other thing that it makes me think of is something Steve Grumbine always talks about, which is the job guarantee as a democracy enhancer. That because it's locally administered, your community gets together and decides, what jobs do we need? It could be town halls or however, it would encourage people to participate. It's an exciting idea to participate. So I kind of like you to address those questions, like the range of jobs that we aren't thinking about yet and how we determine them.
Yeah, these are really, really great questions. So maybe I'll start with the democracy enhancer question. That, look, we are, in many ways, I feel this is a bit of a Western conversation that we are alienated from each other. We're separated. We live in our communities, but we're still apart. Like, if you look at different contexts and different cultural contexts, people live very close together, and there is like communal relationship that our commodified life has. We don't have that, right? So when you think about participatory democracy, I immediately think about the largest job guarantee in the world, India, right? Where the local village forum, like councils, get together in a big open space and they hash it out. And they're like, okay, we have a job guarantee. The government provides money for rural employment. What do we do? What does the community need? They make the decisions together. They just distribute the jobs. The and it's a rural employment guarantee. The Department of Agriculture cannot tell them you can't do this project, right? They can't actually, go against the, the will of the community. So participatory models have been there on and on and on. The one I talk about in my research is Argentina. That's the one that I observed. Again, you just give people an opportunity and they build the connections, they build the network, they build the groups. We know this through our volunteer life, right? So now imagine this on a larger scale when we actually have a public policy that does that. There's another way in which this is a democracy enhancer. It's a democracy in the private working place. So it's not just in the community with the jobs that we can create, but also in the private working place. Like imagine what would be the job of a union if you don't have to face the threat of unemployment. Right? I think that structures fundamentally the way the economy works and the way you negotiate, right? That we have an economy at full employment, tight labor markets for a number of macroeconomic conditions, right? But reasons, but the job guarantee is one of them. And the job of the union, I think, is better. The job of the person who, wants to ask for the next promotion is better. The job of the person who, can resist, somebody who steals their wages. That it changes. I don't want to oversell it. You need to do a lot more to do democracy in the workplace, but it does change certain things in fundamental ways. And then the care economy, that is, I think that this is basically it's not just the framework, but it comes from an understanding of what work is in principle, right? The work in principle as a human condition is a work that we do for others, right? We don't do entirely for ourselves, right? There's no such thing that you do something entirely for yourself, right? You do for your family, for the community. So it's really a how people see themselves, right? And that it's an understanding that, I actually can't do so well without others, right? I can't pave a road. I need to go from here to here. I cannot pave a road. I depend on people to come and pick up my trash, right? I depend on somebody to monitor the medication that I'm taking, right? To check the quality. This is ideology, it's a part of, it's not just ideology, but it's a way of understanding the world. So then once you understand it that way, then work becomes not an end in itself. It becomes the vehicle through which we care for each other. And so then we say, well, which part of our daily life are difficult, challenging? Where do we see greatest obstacles? So, what do people need? They need a roof over their head, right? The basics. So, the food, accessible food, safety. And so we seem to fail on the very basic premise, like basic care fundamentals. We have shiny phones. We have fantastic toys for our children, right? Some of us, others who don't have income don't, but right. But typically, right, we have lots of, phenomenal technology on our fingertips, but we don't have the basics. And so when we rethink what life is, human life is, and how we can reorganize it, then we understand that the things that matter are in fact the things that don't always generate commercial return, or do not exist because of the commercial return, right? They in and of themselves are not, there because somebody can make a profit. It just so happens that somebody can make a profit because they are absolutely essential, right? Right. And we have structured the economy to exploit that human condition, right? So anyway, this is a big picture view, but from the point of view of a job guarantee, it just says that if there's a broken sidewalk or there are not enough handicap accessible roads, we just do them, and that improves everyone's life. Right. So, I use this example all the time. Walk down the street in your neighborhood and tell me what drives you nuts. What, bothers you, which trash, which broken, abandoned building, you look at it and you say, well, why doesn't somebody clean that up? Because we have not decided to care about those things.
Thank you, Pavlina. Marcelo has a question. You can unmute. Marcelo? Okay, I will ask. Would it make sense to make household jobs, parenting, taking care of old, sick family member, be made eligible for federal job guarantee? I hear some people saying it may risk institutionalizing patriarchal social roles and put women at a disadvantage.
Yeah, thank you, Marcelo. I will say that the job guarantee is paid wage work. I wouldn't say that a stay-at-home parent is a job guarantee job. Okay. And I want to say that for me, it's extremely important that we have policies that support caregivers. And I use in my book examples of what those policies are. There are policies for caregivers. Okay. The government pays. I just wouldn't do it as part of the job guarantee, which is still this is still wage work, right? It's, it's market. It's kind of market work, but, public sector market work. So the line is blurred there. But for example, in the US, we have a program for veterans, caregivers of veterans, that they basically get paid to live and to support their disabled veterans. A similar policy could be provided for a caregiver. I strongly believe in this. There are universal child support policies, cash grants for children around the world. I think that's important. When I was growing up, my mother used to get like a check because she had 2 children. Okay, it helped, and I think that is universal childcare. Would be one way of doing that. I think we have to recognize that our safety net must support people who are able to engage in paid labor market work and unpaid work. That we have to comprehensively support them. But at the same time, I also worry about the gender implications of this. Who takes the job? Who stays at home? When we do parental leaves, we talk about parental leaves, but they're not equal. Maternal leave is longer, paternal leave is shorter, right? That already institutionalizes certain gender norms. It comes from gender norms, but it reproduces them. Why don't we have equivalencies? Why can't fathers take the same kind of parental leave as mothers? And thus, at least allow the conversation in the household to change so that one partner can say, hey, you have 3 months too, right? So in that sense, I think we need to think very carefully about what we are providing money for and how we are providing it so that we can also provide a way in which gender norms can come apart. But I think the job is one way in which the gender norms can come apart, because many women stay and take care of children for absence of lack of jobs, and they are the buffer of the family, right? So when you have a job guarantee, that already levels the playing field in certain ways, especially if you have parent-friendly jobs, where the caregiver who has stayed at home now can say, well, you know what, I can do part-time and I can go and work. Now it's not even an option, right? When you have mass unemployment, you say, well, I just decided to stay at home. Well, that's not really a voluntary decision when there's shortage of jobs. So gender norms are structured because we do not provide enough employment for everyone and enough well-paid employment for everyone. So we want to remove this. I mean, we also know that women bringing home a paycheck, changes some of the calculus within the power dynamics within the home. And so if families, I'm not saying everybody needs to be working, man or woman, that everybody has to be in the paid market. But if that's the conversation within the household, it can be done on somewhat more leveled terms if you have the guaranteed option. So, we have many ways in which gender norms play out in the labor market. So again, I don't want to oversell it, but it's a floor. It's a very basic kind of opportunity that was missing before that can provide some empowerment for women.
Thank you, Pavlina. One of our attendees is asking, a new social contract should include the entire concept of redefining work and provide a counter to the capital. How do we message this when so many have been brainwashed into the UBI concept and not realizing the hell of gigifying our entire economy? The precarity is a way of disciplining labor. So how can we message this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, the first thing is, I think, that we just have to resist this narrative of the loss of jobs. I think that it's fundamentally, UBI is very much predicated on an acceptance, on a surrender that precarity is going to be with us. And I don't see a good reason why we need to accept this. And especially when I hear it from progressives, it just blows my mind. So imagine, industrial revolution, right? The immiseration, the mass unemployment, and then people saying, well, the machine is here, right? The steam engine is here. There's nothing we could do, right? This is it. That's not what people said back then. They fought, right? They fought labor laws. They fought with blood and bloodshed and with all of the violence that came, but they also fought subsequently, right? I mean, I'm not an expert on labor law, but when you look at labor law, it has been moving forward one step at a time, providing protections, reducing working hours, establishing a minimum wage, controlling child labor, right? Eliminating child labor, and on and on and on. Fast forward, we now talk about, the Disability Act, the discrimination, equal pay. I mean, we go one step at a time, thinking about the many other ways in which we can improve our working lives. But somehow the UBI philosophy is that there's nothing you could do. It's a technological Armageddon. And precarity is with us, and capitalism sucks, and there's nothing we can do. And, it's a policy of surrender, in my view, in that respect. Now, when we look at the major strides in employment relations, again, I think the New Deal is a really good watershed moment, because while we had labor laws in the 1800s, as labor was being commodified, right? The Great Depression was quite radical for the time, and we made major improvements. Since then, we haven't done such major improvements. And in some ways, we have kind of fought back against unions, so we have regressed, right, in certain aspects. So where's the next big commitment to working people? Because they're not going to go away. Whatever you hear in terms of the rhetoric of the robots marching in, working people are not going away. And we need to be very actively thinking about what it means to be working. So I think for me, the conversation is about reshaping the future of work, is not, dealing with the robots. It's reshaping, dealing with management, right? That's the future of work, dealing with management and dealing with unemployment. And so the job guarantee as a new social contract is, yes, it's employment for the unemployed, but it also is a new way of democratically organizing work, prioritizing social needs, not, prioritizing the environment, the things that are neglected on the long term. And it also says something very concrete. It says we will not have a system where whoever's working will not have basic benefits and protections. That's our gold standard, and that's the one we're going to be defending. So I think one way to just resist this is just simply say no, like don't accept the premise of the analysis. The other argument I think that I hear from UBI is that we're just perpetuating an ideology of wage slave labor, right? I think you've heard that, and to me that is also so devoid of historical context that we change, this is, we come from a place and we go to a place. We came from a place that didn't have wage labor. Okay. Is this the sort of ideal that we're looking for? The feudal society of landed peasantry? Is this what we're talking about? Like, where's the model of non-wage labor that we're aspiring to? Like, what are we looking to? Right? I don't know. I don't have an answer, but we are here. We are in a society of wage labor. And I should recognize that in the developing world, it's not as formalized as here, right? There are huge informal sectors in the developing world, right? They don't have the kind of rapid commodification that we saw in the industrial era. And then the rapid welfare state that we saw in the 30s, right? A lot of countries, poor countries that still have, agriculture, familial production, they have commodity work, but the scholarship from South Africa emphasizes the importance of wage work to formalize these informal relationships, and that in the informal sector. So they actually are saying we need to be thinking about formal ways of working and supporting work. They're not saying forget about wage work and let's just give basic income, right? So it's very interesting, like what people's understanding of going forward is. Like for me, my understanding of going forward is changing the terms on which we provide paid employment, the way we support people in their work through employment and through the broader safety net. But then, of course, that presupposes a different, production model. If you tip the economy that produces for social need and environmental need, that's a different also paradigm, right? So, but it's a step in that direction, right? I don't see in any shape and form how people who could be provided universal basic income somehow are going to get from here to there. Like that, I don't see. I hope that was clear.
Very clear. And how does the job guarantee work with the Green New Deal?
Well, I mean, it really depends. If you read the language of the Green New Deal resolution, there are multiple uses of the job guarantee. And the first one is guaranteed union employment, right? That if we're going to be building solar panels, wind turbines, whatever, like the work is going to be union work. And it will be commensurate with, people's skill, experience, and past wages that they may have lost, right, from fossil fuel production. So it's that kind of guarantee that the transition is going to be as equitable as possible in the labor market. The second guarantee is actually an income guarantee. Early retirement for especially people in the fossil fuel industry, mining, but should they need employment, they will be provided employment with commensurate wages, similar wages. And the final is the public option, the one that I've been talking about and the one that I've been writing about, that the basic standard, the basic job, that no one will get a job that is not minimum 15 plus these benefits that are listed in the Green New Deal resolution. It's the floor. And it's a comprehensive strategy, right? It's not just one program. I think that's the way to go. I think that that's absolutely correct, that a Green New Deal is an all hands on deck industrial policy. It requires every and any level of skill, expertise, wage, resources, know-how, etc. It does require big public investment. Perhaps it requires a significant socialization of investment, meaning that the public sector does and perhaps even owns the investment, right? But the public job option, the job guarantee is somewhat different. It really deals with the most vulnerable. It says, if it's going to be an inclusive society, we will not allow anyone to go without an basic employment opportunity. So that would be the way I would think about it.
Pavlina, it has been an hour. Are you willing to stay? We still have a lot of questions. Are you willing to stay a little longer?
Yes, I'm happy to stay a little bit longer.
Great. Would you do me a favor and tell us how to pronounce your last name?
Tcherneva.
Tcherneva. Americans will never get it right, but I just wanted to confirm. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Ralph has a question. You can unmute Ralph.
I believe I'm unmuted. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The federally funded, locally implemented model, I think, is probably the right one here. Problem is that we've got that going in a number of different areas currently. Medicaid being one of them, and support for basically children with disabilities is, learning disabilities, and that is another. And it tends to have a lot of local nature associated with it, and that tends to be biased by people that believe government should be doing these things, and other people that believe that, if you can't monetize it, commercially, it's not really important. How would you address that? And one other thing I would appreciate your enlightening me on is you made the comment that you don't see unemployment insurance going away. And I don't understand that, because I would think a job guarantee would could fully eliminate the need, for unemployment insurance. I'm not talking about welfare, or SSDI or something like that, but, unemployment, insurance as it currently exists.
All right. Let me start with the second one. So I don't see it as a replacement. I really would not want to see a job guarantee either as a replacement of unemployment insurance or as a condition of unemployment insurance. I just want to be very clear about that. And the reason is the following. There may be circumstances where people cannot take employment immediately after they have left one employment opportunity. Perhaps the temporary income support is the appropriate solution. If we're really, talking about choice, I think that we need to have both, because otherwise it's not really a choice. You absolutely have to take the job guarantee. You must. There's no other way. And I think in that sense, it's not truly voluntary. I think that the unemployment, the jobs program will reduce the need for those programs. I would prefer to see a change in anti-poverty programs that is natural, right? From the way that, we have redesigned or improved the public welfare safety net. So if people are in poverty because their employment doesn't give them above poverty income, let the job guarantee raise the floor for all, and then, invalidate, the need for these programs. Like, it just naturally, that will happen. And so if a person doesn't want unemployment insurance, but knows and understands that there is an employment opportunity, they go to the unemployment office, right? So that's my proposal, that we just transform the unemployment offices to jobs banks. And of course, this, is not really physical anymore. A lot of it is also online, but, we do have these job centers. So if you seek assistance in that resource, apply for unemployment insurance or employment opportunities, then you do have, you take one or the other, right? So I would prefer that this stays there. About the local administration, I'm not sure if I understood completely the question. That is whether it's the public sector should basically socialize, right? Provide the actual programs, or whether it should be like, the local administration, like, Medicare might be administered at the local level, Medicaid, or might be administered at the local level. I believe that public options should be public options, right? They should be federally backstopped. and there should be some discretion on how they are run. But, we know that our system of federalism, unfortunately, has created enormous disparities, as we saw with the unemployment insurance system. And, different states are making these policies more punitive. So, I know this runs a little bit against sort of the current of conventional view, but the fundamental safety nets, I think they need to have a basic standard that is federally codified.
Thank you, Pavlina. John has a question.
Yeah, this one is from our comrade Rebecca Rice, who's out there in the audience. How you doing, Rebecca? And she says, I asked Bill Black this question, but wanted your opinion. How would the job guarantee deal with state labor laws such as right to work and anti-union action?
I don't know if I have a good answer to this question. How would they work? I mean, with, in some, in some sense, imagine a jobs program that is allowed to unionize, right? They can form a federal, their own union. Again, I think that there is, some tension, I think, between the federal and the state powers, right, that sort of play out in policy. And this was one tension that we saw in the New Deal, right? When the federal projects were put in place, local governors didn't want them. They had to go. Harry Hopkins had to go and threaten them. And so there is a lot of tension there in how states might embrace these. I think this is one of the reasons why I had proposed also a nonprofit model for implementation, that you don't have to be dependent on state legislation to get the federal funding, to get the support for the program. I remember during Obama, when I think it was Florida refused $50 billion, $50 billion maybe it was, for fast rail or something like that, right? It was, it was extraordinary. And so, I think that the nonprofit model, would be, one way of also, proceeding with creating the projects. We can always have, a Trump and power that may also try to sort of at the federal level, right, or a Reagan, right, that tries to reduce funding, because we know that a formula for destroying programs is defund and destroy. So there's no fail safe necessarily. Like if it's the federal program, then it's gonna be fine. But what we see from the India example one more time is that this policy creates the constituencies that then fight for it. So in the state in India, I mean, it is assaulted by cuts, but then they can't avoid it. The pandemic was upon them. Many people moved from urban areas back to rural areas. And they had to, it was a law, right? They had to provide the funding. So, they appropriated. So I've often said, and as I argue in the book, it's good to have a legally codified right. That I think is critical, because the large scale program in South Africa gets reauthorized. Okay. And I'm actually hosting in one of my classes on Monday, I believe, the former chief director of the Expanded Public Works program in South Africa. And it was very successful. In 5 years, it was reauthorized. And then it's still there. But I'm not sure exactly, what's the situation. But it's precarious. It's not funded well. It's doesn't provide adequate employment. We know what happens in Argentina, right? Crisis was over, it was scrapped. But India survives. India survives despite all of these political problems and challenges. And so, it remains to be seen, but there is some sort of institutional framework within which that, it can be made workable.
We're going to ask you 2 more questions, and then I'll let you free. But Nick has a question. You can unmute Nick.
Hi. So my question is about how to reach a critical mass of people which will need to pass legislation. When I talk to people, I have a tendency to kind of go overboard when talking about MMT. So I'm wondering would you even bring that up when talking to the average American who doesn't really have a long attention span about this? And then just other strategies for talking to the average American would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. I struggled with this when I wrote this book. I had a very strict word limit by my publisher, and I really struggled how to present the argument. And I know there's a disagreement. Warren Mosler would say you have to start with the tax rates and employment, and that's how you have to make the case. I didn't. In fact, I don't think I even mentioned that in the book. For me, it's very important that you understand MMT to be able to understand, fully appreciate what a macroeconomic paradigm shift this is. So I have a book on a chapter on MMT that kind of hopefully whets people's appetite, like they can hold on to something, then run with it. But the tax credits and employment for some people is just over their head, and you lose them. And so maybe his strategy is better than mine. I don't know. But what I have found is that at the gut level, people understand that if somebody wants a job, we should be able to provide that employment opportunity. There aren't really good reasons why to say no, right? And so when you look at how the job guarantee polls, it polls so favorably and across the political spectrum, right? People do believe in jobs and employment. And so how do you reach a mass audience? I don't know. I've been trying for a long time. But I think, there are multiple ways in which I used MMT in the book, right? In the book, I tried to make 3 arguments. The first one is to recognize that every policy that we've been told we cannot have has been based on a lie, right? That the government cannot support or finance it. And so that immediately has to be the first no, right? And so sovereign finance, that provides a framework that, once people understand, then they're not so willing to give up their social security or other things they believe in because there's just no other way. So the first thing is, sometimes if that comes first, is the MMT. So that was the first argument I made. The second argument that I made, and I often make, is that the current way in which we deal with unemployment is far more inefficient, expensive, detrimental. It just doesn't work. So there are, multiple ways you could say, well, you have to be careful because people always think just in terms of money, and they think, so when I tell them, what do you want to pay for? Do you want to have a rundown community, or do you want to have community that's, buttoned up? And so I try to lead the conversation to the real stuff rather than the financial stuff when we talk about policy. And then I say, look, we do all these policies in the name of job creation. Everything is in the name of job creation, right? Every big package, every big subsidy, every big contract is in the name of job creation. I read just the other day, I think it was a CNN article, that the cost per saved job from the airline industry bailout was $300,000 per job, right? $300,000 per job. And we know the flight attendants didn't get that, right? we know that's not it. So the way it works is totally bankrupt. And I've come on your show to argue that, you just pay the payroll, just pay the wages, let them stay on the payroll for, however long you think is right. The industry probably needs some restructuring, but we have a job guarantee, right? And so that is the shortest distance, the most direct, the most efficient, the cheapest, but also it's the most productive way, because we don't pay for the existing neglect and unemployment and poverty and all the other stuff that comes with it. So, I always emphasize how this is baked into our policies and how it's unavoidable, and how it doesn't matter what you do. You may think we're not paying for it. We're absolutely paying for it. And there's a cheaper way. We did the same thing for France. There was a very robust job guarantee campaign there. The mayor of Paris and the mayor of Lille endorsed the job guarantee. They polled it. I worked with an institute there, and they did a poll which showed, again, it's this very similar to the polling in the US and the UK. In the 80s, in the high 70s, strong bipartisan support. And we calculated the kind of subsidies that they do for jobs. And it was far more expensive than if we were just to employ directly the unemployed. So that's the second strategy, right? The first one is kind of debunking, the myths about government spending. If people latch onto, then talk about, the tax. That, I think, that is a paradigm shift. But if that conversation is difficult, move to the compare today to what it could be, right? And then the final bit is, I toss some numbers because, of course, people want to know numbers. It's not, I always qualify, it's not the most productive way to think about this, because the whole point of the job guarantee is to be there in desperate times. So, maybe I calculated 1.5% of GDP, but if you are in the middle of the pandemic, maybe you need 10% of GDP. Actually, you won't need 10% of GDP because, we just saw we had 14 million people unemployed. We already calculated at Levy that for 14 million people, that would be about 1.5% of GDP. There are moving parts, but what I'm saying is, you want to drive people to think not in their static ways about jobs or money, but in these dynamic ways, in what the program can do to the overall economy, what it could do to budgets, that it reduces government. You see, that I think that is a neglected point. It does reduce government, all this, enormous resources, money, over policing, anti-poverty programs, all of this, like looking at people's histories to make sure that they qualify for food stamps. I mean, we could just get rid of all of that by providing and guaranteeing decent employment.
That is a great point. Last question of the evening. Unfortunately, Jeffrey, you can unmute.
Hello, Pavlina. Thank you for coming tonight.
Hi.
I'm going to pull my question. So to expound on Curtis's question earlier, if communities are in charge of the program, would we have some sort of federal oversight committee to make sure it was ran fairly?
Yeah, I think that's right. When you have federal contracts, there are some strings attached with them, right? There are some basic procurement standards, right, of how the funding is being used. So it's not too different, I think, from how we would otherwise do things. I mean, I think that when you say, okay, this is going to be the labor standard for the job, there are some additional requirements, right, that the program will need to meet. We don't provide universal childcare with other policies, but let's say Medicare, right? We don't provide, Medicare with other contracts or policies. So that would be a criteria to be met. I mean, in the book, I actually argue something else about the universal childcare. That is, there's a disagreement, I think, in people who talk about the job guarantee. There are colleagues who think the job guarantee should provide jobs in childcare. Yeah, I'm not, to me, I don't really see it that way. Like for me, childcare is professionalized, permanent federal program because it has to be accessible to all, whether you're in the job guarantee or not in the job guarantee. So for me, the universal child care comes with the job guarantee as a companion federal policy that's attached to it, but actually it's not conditional, right, on the job guarantee. I see the sites of childcare sites as training opportunities for young teachers, right? For after school programs, assistants, shadowing teachers, of course. And I see pretty much, the job guarantee as doing this kind of placement for trainees, not just in the universal childcare, but in the public school education system, in the nursing homes, in the hospitals, that you create trainee programs. But I won't say, I wouldn't say childcare has to be a job guarantee job. Like childcare has to be permanent, right? Accessible to all.
Thank you so much, Pavlina.
I want to remind everyone, Ramona, that next week we have Rowan Gray as our guest expert, another favorite around here. More importantly, anyone who attends 3 sessions can get a free copy of the book. And let me just tell you, there are only 2 sessions left. But if you're only able to attend 2 sessions and we still have books left over, I believe we can give, until they run out, we can give people who attend 2 sessions the books. Our financial officer, Roseanne, might not approve of me saying that, but I'm offering it anyway. So, go ahead, Ramona. Thank you, Pavlina.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Here.
This was great. I really appreciate your time and reading the book.
Excellent. Well, I've learned so much. Thank you so much.